Tell me, what's the most absurd thing anyone has ever done to you? Because look, turning your land into a makeshift hydroelectric plant without your permission and then calling you an ingrate, I think that's a bit beyond the bounds of reason, right? But let's break it down. Because this story didn't start with a flood. It started with a woman who wanted to be the planet's savior and ended with people wearing unicorn floaties in their living rooms. She arrived in the neighborhood like someone who had come to install world peace, carrying binders, talking about community sustainability, and handing out pamphlets with words like ecological balance, aquatic renewal, and the flow of abundance. Except that the abundance, in this case, was in the face. You know that person who always has their nose where it doesn't belong? That person who confuses the neighborhood with a reality show and thinks they're the protagonist? That's right. That's the one. It took her 2 weeks to start pointing the finger at other people's land as if she owned the map of the city. And mine? Mine was the grand prize. The blessed land, according to her. Full of water potential, she said, because there was a small spring at the bottom, hidden among the trees. It had always been there. My grandmother used it to water the plants, and I looked after it lovingly. But she saw it and had an epiphany. She told her neighbors that the flow of water on that property is a clear sign that this is the neighborhood's point of energy convergence. The only thing missing was a priest to baptize the spring. And when I said that the water was mine, private, that it was on my land, and that I didn't want any work done there, she giggled and said, "Oh, you have so much to give, and you don't want to share?" As if I were the selfish one in the story. She was appropriating my land, and I was the villain for not wanting to become a human hydroelectric station. A week later, bulldozers. I swear, excavators on my land. Uniformed workers, signs with the name Community Renewable Green Initiative, and a giant banner attached to the fence with the slogan, "Clean Energy for All, thanks to a generous heart." Huh? They didn't even consult me. The HOA signed an informal agreement with this woman, saying that she had the go-ahead to implement a community microgeneration pilot project. And where was the pilot? On my land. The plan involved diverting water from the spring, digging an artificial channel, installing homemade turbines, and pumping the energy directly into the neighborhood grid. All done with love and gratitude, as the brochure said. The sound of construction began at 7 in the morning, every day. Drills, crushers, sawdust, concrete, cement. My land, that space where I used to relax with a beer, now looked like a construction site from hell. And the wife? She came by every day, dressed in a fluorescent vest, white helmet and goggles, even though she wasn't doing anything, just to pose. She took photos to post on the HOA group as if she were the local Greta Thunberg, revolutionizing the world one PVC turbine at a time. The most bizarre thing? The locals applauding. Yes, there were people clapping. They said she was a visionary, that she was bringing innovation to the community, that this energy would save the planet. I was the anti-ecological grouch who didn't know how to appreciate her own good fortune. They even gave me a certificate. Yes, a laminated certificate with my name in gold letters, Guardian of Water. I thought it was a joke, but it wasn't. It was official. And do you know what she dared to say, looking me right in the face, with that little smile of someone who thinks they've done me a favor? "You should thank me for being part of something so much bigger than you." Of course. Be thankful that you can no longer open the back door without falling into a mud pit, for not having grass anymore, for seeing my dog traumatized because the land has now become a pond with a turbine, not to mention the scattered wires, the noisy water pumps, and the constant smell of wet work. But that wasn't the end of it. The icing on the cake came when the woman had the audacity to post an official note on the HOA's wall. Thanks to our new community clean energy system, we saved 12% on our electricity bill this month. Special thanks to the resident of Lot 27, who kindly gave us his space to make this possible. He did. Me. Kindly. You know what's most ironic? Their savings came along with a bizarre increase in my own energy bill, because, of course, the turbine's entire electrical system was plugged into my grid. I was paying for the privilege of being exploited, and when I confronted them, I received a handwritten letter. "We understand your discomfort. Energy flows, as does generosity. Trust the process. The process will be judicial, dear." But before I got to that point, I would still try to solve it my way. And that's when the chaos really started. The first thing I did after that thank you note from the HOA was to buy a bottle of cheap whiskey and sit on the balcony looking at the disaster that had become my land. It was like watching a Discovery Channel documentary, but without the narration and with the smell of open pipes. The spring, which used to be a quiet, pretty little thing at the bottom of the property, had turned into a raging water monster. And it wasn't by chance. Karen, yes, she herself, had had powerful pumps installed that sucked the water out of the ground and pushed it into a containment box on the side of the fence. I discovered this after almost falling in, trying to understand what that constant humming was. I spent the whole of Saturday trying to understand what part of the universe allowed an association of neighbors to think they had the right to install a homemade plant on someone's land. I called the town hall. The woman who answered said that if it's been approved by the HOA, it's probably within the community's standards. Community standards? My egg. I called a lawyer. He said he would need to see documents, meeting minutes, construction records. And you know what Karen did? She disappeared with everything. When I asked for a copy of the minutes of the meeting that supposedly approved the work, she said that, unfortunately, the physical files were damaged by humidity, and we're still digitizing everything, okay? Of course, the water that invaded her house later had no problem digitizing the furniture. On Monday, things got worse, much worse. Karen had the audacity to install a little gate on the side of my plot with a numerical code, as if it were an official entrance to the plant. Yes, my land became a tourist spot for clean energy, and I didn't even get a badge. I started seeing locals coming in with water bottles and leaflets, taking photos in front of the mini turbine, as if it were the new Hollywood sign. One woman asked me if the tour included tasting water from the spring. Another wanted to know if she could bring her Labrador to swim in the makeshift canal. One suggested that the HOA install a wooden deck with sun loungers. And Karen? She was smiling like a tour guide, wearing a white polo shirt with the Energy for All logo embroidered on the chest. But there was one detail she hadn't foreseen. My terrain was slightly sloping. No big deal, a natural engineering thing, but it made the water, once uncontrolled, run down with gusto. And there, between PVC pipes and patches made with insulating tape, our heroin system began to show cracks. Literally, the main reservoir, made from parts repurposed from an old children's water park, began to leak. And it leaked beautifully. I went there in the middle of the night and heard the sound of splashing. It was worse than thunder. I opened a flashlight and saw water pouring down one side, going straight to the lowest point in the neighborhood, Karen Street. Just the street where the HOA bigwigs live, the husbands in suits, the wives with hairspray-stiffened hair, and the spoiled teenagers who think life is TikTok and electric cars. It was paradise for those who called me ungrateful for not supporting the cause. Now, I just had to wait for the water to go down. But before you play innocent, I confess, I helped the universe. I pulled the containment grid with a rope, very discreetly. Just a little push. When the makeshift dam broke for good, it looked like a scene from a movie. A tsunami of brown water, full of leaves and sticks, rolled down the sidewalk like an avalanche. It entered through the gates of the houses, passed through the gardens, carried away a plastic flamingo, a pool chair, an inflatable toy, everything. An ornamental fountain ended up across the street. One lady came out onto her balcony shouting, "Jesus, it's the end of times," while trying to save a ceramic vase. Karen's house was the first to be hit hard. I watched from my balcony as the water invaded her garden and rose like it was thirsting for revenge. It invaded the living room, soaked the sofa, the Persian rug, and knocked over an aquarium with exotic fish. The woman came out with her hair stuck to her forehead, dressed in a bathrobe, screaming with a bucket in her hand, as if it were possible to contain a flood with a Tupperware. And the most insane thing? She still tried to blame me. That's right. In the middle of the confusion, she crossed the street with the water on her shin and shouted, "You sabotaged my dam. That's an environmental crime." Environmental crime? Woman, you invaded my property, built an illegal power plant, and now you're complaining about Mother Nature doing her job? I pretended not to hear. I just sipped my whiskey, shook my head, and went back inside. The irony was too delicious to be interrupted. That was liquid poetic justice, literally. The police arrived, of course. They were called by someone desperate, probably the guy who lost the floating Tesla in the garage. They knocked and asked if I had seen what had happened. I said that I had, that I'd noticed the reservoir at the HOA's community plant showing signs of collapse since the weekend, but that nobody wanted to listen to me when I warned them. I made a point of showing the letter I had received, signed by Karen, thanking me for my environmental generosity and recognizing me as an energy partner for the community. The policeman read it with the look of someone who didn't want to be there. I just laid the paper on the table and asked, "Can this be used as proof that I had nothing to do with this dam?" The guy said yes, and that the town hall was going to investigate, and that's when the house fell down for good. The next day, the neighborhood looked like something out of a post-apocalyptic movie. There was a mattress floating in the middle of the street, a bent HOA sign stuck in a tree, and an entire closet stranded in the gutter, with the doors open as if it were begging for help. The smell? A mixture of mud, mold, and bruised ego. The HOA staff was in a panic. No one knew where to put their faces, let alone the wet furniture. And Karen? Karen was intent on playing the martyr. She appeared wrapped in a white sheet, sitting on the sidewalk, surrounded by candles and wet plants, giving an interview to the local channel. She called it a community catastrophe caused by an insensitive neighbor who refuses to cooperate with ecological evolution. He made a point of using difficult words and blaming me with every syllable. He said that I had destroyed the collective effort of a neighborhood engaged in energy regeneration. And all this with my hair sticking to my forehead and my makeup running, looking like a soap opera villain who's just had a shower. The story aired in the evening with before and after images of her street. Before, beautiful houses, everything clean. After, floating furniture, a soggy garden, a plastic flamingo stuck on a broomstick. They just forgot to mention the detail that the plant was built illegally, without permission, on private land, with a homemade hydraulic pump made from patched pipe. Small detail, right? Her narrative was more interesting without that. While the TV was showing this nonsense, I was in the kitchen with my lawyer. He already had a copy of the HOA project in his hands, the prints of the neighborhood groups where Karen bragged about the work, and the flyer with my name prominently displayed, congratulating me on my generosity in giving up the space. He just laughed dryly and said, "That woman dug her own grave with a turbine." The next day, the town hall sent 2 environmental inspectors. They were in uniform, with clipboards under their arms and faces like little friends. They examined everything: the pumps, the pipes, what was left of the dam's structure. They even measured the depth of the spring with a metal ruler. They took photos, made notes, and when they saw that the energy generated had been diverted to supply 3 houses on Karen Street, one of them let out a, "This is going to lead to a lawsuit." That was music to my ears. Later, I received an official notification from the town hall itself, saying that I was exempt from any responsibility for the incident, and that the HOA would be investigated for irregular installation of hydraulic works, improper use of electricity, and illegal alteration of the watercourse. The icing on the cake was discovering that Karen had altered HOA documents to simulate a collective authorization, except that one of the board members, a gentleman named Earl, who everyone thought was almost dead, showed up saying he never signed anything. They said he had Alzheimer's, but he remembered that Karen had offered him an apple pie to sign a little piece of paper. It didn't take long for internal turmoil to begin. The other members of the HOA started accusing each other. One group called for a mass resignation, and the woman who took care of the accounting dropped everything and posted in the group, "I refuse to cover up someone else's fraud. Good luck." Chaos ensued. Karen tried to keep up the theatrics, pretending she was being persecuted. She posted stories on Instagram with a black and white filter, dramatic captions like, "When the truth threatens the power of those who hide in ignorance," and things like that. Nobody fell for it anymore. The neighborhood that used to clap back now wanted her head served with mashed potatoes. There was a guy who showed up with a kayak in front of her house just to mock her. Another neighbor posted a video saying that her blender fried because it was turned on during the community energy peak. The woman almost sued for moral damages caused by culinary electroshock. Then she made her final mistake. He tried to enter my property again. That's right. After all that, she climbed over the side gate, stepped into the still wet mud of the failed construction site, and went straight to the destroyed turbine structure. I caught it all on the security camera. She had a rucksack on her back, stuffing some wet papers into a plastic bag. When she saw my balcony light come on, she froze. I stayed silent, just watching. She shouted, "I'm just collecting project documents. They're of collective interest." I walked over to the fence with my arms crossed and said, "It's so interesting that you've invaded the land again to get it." She took a deep breath, took a step back, and let it go. "This will all become history. One day, you'll thank me." I went to the intercom and called the police. For the third time that week, the official report stated trespassing, attempted destruction of evidence, and possible falsification of documents. The deputy who took the case laughingly commented that he had never investigated an illegal power plant in a middle-class neighborhood. The following week, Karen's house became a hotspot for the press. News cars, snooping neighbors, policemen on the beat. There was an emergency HOA meeting, the first with mass attendance. The result? Karen was removed as president for abusive conduct, document fraud, and misuse of other people's property. It was nice to see, but I still wasn't satisfied. The next step would be to turn this nightmare into a success. If she wanted to play power engineer, now she was going to have to face a legal bill. I woke up one Monday to a notice from the town hall stuck to the gate of my plot. It read, "Area under investigation, possible environmental crime." That was it. Karen had done it. After trespassing, stealing energy, turning my land into a junkyard, she still had the audacity to denounce me for causing an ecological disaster. The woman was playing the public victim. She cried in neighborhood groups, made stories with black and white filters, saying that she was being persecuted by forces that don't understand sustainable progress. At the last HOA meeting, and that was before she was kicked out, she showed up with a PowerPoint full of photos of my flooded land, with the caption, "Where the dream of clean energy was born." To call it a dream is pushing it too far. That was a nightmare, and she was Freddy Krueger with a turbine. And like every nightmare, it was time to wake up. I swear I tried to go the right way. I knocked on the door of the town hall, took all the evidence, the photos of the invasion, the fraudulent HOA documents, the prints of the flyers with my name used without permission, and even the videos of the turbines spitting water in carnival rhythm. Do you know what they told me? "We're going to open an investigation. The infamous answer piccole de choo-choo." Meanwhile, Karen continued to pose as a martyr. She even appeared on a YouTube channel giving an interview about community microgeneration and confronting territorial conservatism. She talked tough to sound important, but deep down, she was just a lady who turned my land into a hydraulic trap, and she was still free. That's when I realized something. If she could play water goddess, I could too. Only I was going to do it better. I was going to do it the way it really works. No PowerPoint, no fake smile, no meeting. The revenge wasn't going to be violent. It was going to be geographical. I spent 2 weeks studying the terrain, the slope, the flow of the spring, the lowest points in the neighborhood. I revisited the path where the first flood had flowed, the one caused by the failure of the dam itself. And there, right there, I saw what I needed, a perfect curve. All it needed was a little push, an adjustment, a new drainage channel, strategically dug. I bought the tools, waited for night to fall, and went to work. In the dark, a meter a night, always in disguise. The wet earth gave way easily. The land still bore the trauma of the failed mill. The water, which already flowed naturally, now had a new path, a path that led straight to the center of Karen Street. And her HOA troop, those who applauded the idea, those who signed paper without reading, took selfies in the turbine, and called me anti-community. On the third day of digging, I could already hear the water running strongly. On the fourth, I could already see puddles forming below. And when the rain came, nature did the rest. All we had to do was wait. The next morning, chaos ensued. The street turned into a canal, literally. The water came down hard, carrying mud, leaves, and a level of irony so delicious that I almost cried with laughter. The houses that had previously received energy from the plant were now receiving water in the carpet. The same energy that Karen said was the light of the future was now illuminating a floating neighborhood. It was a spectacle. Karen's house was swallowed up halfway. She ran out screaming, trying to carry her dog in a bucket. The remaining dam crumbled like wet paper. The garage became a swimming pool. Her sofa appeared 2 streets down, stranded on a welcome home sign. No one posted anything in the HOA group. Silence. Everyone disappeared. The facade of sustainability collapsed, along with the white picket fence and the compost heap that she had shown so much in her live streams. The city council came, of course. They sent engineers, civil defense, social workers, and even a counselor with rubber boots pretending to care. But this time, I was ready. I showed my land intact, the spring where it had always been, the natural channel dug with millimeter perfection, a work that any expert would call landscape adjustment. I showed the evidence of her sabotage, the records of the dam, the Gambiara, the wires, the lies, the videos of the woman in the toy helmet pretending to be an engineer. I showed everything. Do you know what the city council did? It charged Karen with environmental crime, falsifying documents, trespassing, and misuse of water resources. The cherry on top was an engineer's report saying that the alterations made to the hydrodynamics of the area were caused exclusively by the interventions of the irregular work of the HOA, led by Karen M. They even used hydrodynamics. The woman who tried to be a revolutionary was now going to have to answer for a mini residential tsunami. She was sued by 10 residents. One of them demanded reimbursement for an entire aquarium. Another wanted compensation for having lost her pantry with $200 worth of meat. The woman at the end of the street claimed that her orchid garden had become a swamp, and now only moss grows. She had no way out. She tried to escape responsibility by saying it was all a collective mistake, but the other former HOA members pointed at her in sync. She did it all by herself. Karen was tried, convicted, and fined more than her own car. She had to sell her house. The final irony? The house was only bought because it became famous as the mansion that floated. A couple of YouTubers bought it just to record videos with titles like "Living 7 Days in the Most Flooded House in the USA." The channel bombed, Karen disappeared. After months, the neighborhood returned to normal. The HOA was officially disbanded. The bylaws were torn up, the signs disappeared. No one talks about clean energy or microgeneration anymore. Now the talk is about barbecues, new fences, and who's bringing the cooler to the next party. And my land? It's intact. The spring is there, calm and peaceful, as it always should have been. What about me? I've finished my personal work with a little sign at the entrance to the land. Risk area. Here, the truth is born. And every time it rains, I smile. And if you liked this video, don't forget to leave a comment and a like.